Welcome back to your Heat latest on FanArc. I'm Sam Shapiro. If you haven't checked out the action on Underdog Fantasy yet, stop what you're doing right now. You can actually use this QR code right up here to download the app today and use our promo code BasketballFan to score $75 in bonus entries when you play your first $5. Super Bowl right around the corner. We're in the middle of all the NBA action going on right now. Definitely a great time to make some picks and get in on the excitement over there. So again, thank you to Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring today's video. We are 8 days away from the NBA trade deadline. And up until this point, I haven't been very convinced that Miami has had a concrete, solid plan. And if they want to stop and shop, keep together what they have, exactly what they really want to do, aside from Giannis or bust at this point in time. But now this report that I've come across from Kelly Iko is suggesting that that might not necessarily be the case in terms of why is Sam confused about what is going on. Anyway, he's saying, quote, outside of the Ja Morant Miami connection reported 2 weeks ago, the Heat are thought to be seeking smaller scale deals that would further fortify their asset war chest, positioning them for Giannis or a similar scale superstar if and when they become available. The if and when, for me, definitely the most intriguing part of what Iko had to say in this report, because it's not necessarily saying Miami is positioning themselves to make a move in 8 days, but potentially for the summer, which is what I've been talking about on the channel here. If they don't make a move now, they could just be positioning themselves for later when they have a potential better supporting cast to wrap around a player like Giannis Antetokounmpo. Now, I don't think that player is going to be Ja Morant in terms of the superstar they want to bring in and ultimately wrap this team and what they look like right now around them, but definitely seems like, at least based on this report, that Miami could be bracing itself to sign Giannis over the course of this summer. And that's assuming Antetokounmpo doesn't take his talents to the Big Apple or San Antonio or Oklahoma City or anywhere else that I've mentioned here on the channel so far, because I think at that point, I think the ship has sailed. But I think this is at least a little bit, it's leaps and bounds slightly, I would say, in comparison to what we've seen Miami do in the past, where they've had their name thrown out to be in the bidding for a superstar, but they ultimately don't capitalize on the opportunity. And this could just be a slow burn into what I think we're potentially going to see Miami get into this summer, when they hopefully make more of a charge at Giannis Antetokounmpo, when they have a better cast, at least in their rotation, to support him once he is able to join the 305. I'm not saying that Miami doesn't have that right now, but seems like Pat Riley might have some other plans into how to construct this team so that when the time comes, that this Heat team looks even better than they do right now, with Antetokounmpo landing in South Beach. And in terms of smaller scale trades that I think Miami could be looking at, I think if there were a trade to go for Antetokounmpo, Miami has pretty much offered everything outside of Bam Adebayo willingly, that being Tyler Hero, Khalil Ware, Andrew Wiggins. But I think in any smaller scale type of trade, I think Wiggins would also be a centerpiece that's likely headed out of Miami at this point in time. We talked about on the channel here how I could definitely see him potentially going to the Los Angeles Lakers or reuniting in the Bay with the Golden State Warriors. I think both teams also could offer supporting cast type assets to Miami that would complement a team that's built around a Giannis Antetokounmpo type of player. So 2 trades I think that really stuck off the page for me in, kind of this whole situation. Obviously, the Warriors have been in talks with Miami about doing a Kuminga for Wiggins swap. Miami throws in Drew Smith. Golden State could potentially also throw in a Buddy Hield and a first-round draft pick, which would definitely be great complementary assets that Miami could take advantage of, even if you're bringing in a guy like Kuminga, who might not be, or at least is not going to play at a higher ceiling, I think, than Andrew Wiggins is right now. I might be wrong. Sue me in the comments if that's how you feel, but I think in terms of what you're at least getting a younger player with a similar skill set to what Wiggins has right now. On the Lakers side, you could trade Wiggins and Smith, that same package, to LA from Miami in exchange for Rui Hachimura. Dalton Knecht could be thrown in some sort of trade, as well as a first round pick to go with that as well. So I definitely think in terms of both of those trades, there are a lot of assets that could come off the bench for Miami right now, make a difference in being impact type players to help the Heat get in the win column, but also future draft assets that Miami could use to slowly rebuild in the years to come. Drop in the comments what you guys think. If Andrew Wiggins is likely headed out of South Beach for this trade deadline with some of the smaller scale options Miami could potentially be going for in some sort of deal outside of maybe winning a Giannis Antetokounmpo sweepstakes. Before I dive into another, I think, topic at hand that has been continuing to circulate because Miami at least is expected, I feel like, or at least has some pressure on them to make a move before or at the deadline. Before I'm going to dive into some of that, I just want to give a shout out to the sponsor of today's video at Underdog Fantasy. Fast breaks, buzzer beaters, and block parties are back, and Underdog is the best place to get in on all the action. Playing on Underdog is easy. Just pick whether your favorite players will go higher or lower on stats like points, rebounds, steals, and more. Get your picks right, and you can win up to 5,000 times your cash. This week on Underdog, I'm looking at the Los Angeles Lakers taking on the Cleveland Cavaliers tonight. I'm selecting Luka Doncic for lower than 33.5 points and Donovan Mitchell for lower than 32.5 points. Download the app today and use promo code BASKETBALLFAN to score $75 in bonus entries when you play your first $5. Again, that's promo code BASKETBALLFAN, and it's on Underdog. Make picks, win money.
Must be 18 plus. 19 plus in Alabama, Nebraska. 19 plus in Colorado for some games. 21 plus in Arizona, Massachusetts, and Virginia. And present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. See assets.underdogfantasy.com/play and get terms DFSTML for details. Offer not valid in Maryland, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. In New York, call the 24/7 helpline at 1-878 or text HOMI 467-369.
In the midst of what could be a major blockbuster deal or just, a trade that could acquire a number of players and draft picks, I feel like the topic of conversation more so has been, is Miami going to include a Tyler Hero or a Norman Powell? And while I think a lot of those trade suggestions lean towards Hero over Powell, just wanted to talk about in the scenario why you necessarily shouldn't keep both and should maybe throw one in some sort of mega trade deal that Miami could take advantage of. Fortunately, while on paper this Miami team should look a lot more elite with both Powell and Hero in the starting lineup, the fact of the matter is they're just not. I think offensively they're slightly better with just Norman in comparison to just Hero, or they're roughly the same as when Powell is on the floor, when you have Powell and Hero both on the court for Miami. When you look at Miami's on-court offensive rating and defensive rating, 107.9 and 112.9 versus the off-the-court, the offensive rating jumps to 115 and the defensive rating jumps to 115. Then when you look at Norman Powell, when he's on the court, the offensive rating higher than when Hero's there by roughly 10. 117.3, the defensive rating, 113.8. So again, the 117 offensive rating when Powell's on the court versus when Hero's on the court, 117 to 109, ballpark in that. I mean, it's not an alarming, majorly crazy, tear the whole thing down type of difference, but it's definitely a noticeable difference that the Heat are a better team, at least in terms of these two ratings when Powell is there versus when he's not. Off the court defensively, the offensive rating is 110 and the defensive rating is pretty much stays the same at 113. So when both of these guys are on the floor, the defensive rating stays at around 113, but the offensive ratings definitely take a little bit of a shift. And when you look at least when both of these guys are on the floor together, when Powell and Hero are both there, offensively, the offensive rating 113, the defensive rating 112, versus when you look at Hero on and Powell off, that offensive rating is 104 versus when Powell's on and Hero's off, the defensive rating is 117. So when you're looking at those advanced stats, I mean, I would say even before kind of looking at these numbers, I would have just suggested that Powell offensively has been slightly more of a success story than Hero this season, but he's also been just gelling with how this team looks a lot more efficiently than Tyler Hero has. Fortunately, when at least when both guys are off the floor, the offensive and defensive ratings both sitting around 112, but the difference in terms of the overall net rating, Powell on, Hero off, that net rating sitting at around just under +4 versus when Hero's on and Powell's off -9. I think at that point, if you're debating who you're going to center a major superstar trade package type deal for, you center it around Tyler Hero, especially if it's going to Milwaukee with that incentive to send the hometown kid back to where he grew up to play for the Milwaukee Bucks. Drop in the comments what you guys think, who you think should stay or go, because well, I've got a Hero jersey behind me. I think I've made it pretty obvious, unfortunately, who I would want to keep, at least for, well, not unfortunately, but who I would rather want to keep in Miami's good graces following a major deal that could shake up Miami's roster. Speaking of deals that could also shake up Miami's roster, two other players that I saw Bleacher Report talk about would most likely be traded at the deadline would be Simone Fontecchio and, if possible, Terry Rozier. I don't think those trades would necessarily majorly shake up the lineup in the grand scheme of things, but I think at least if you get rid of Fontecchio, who's been trying to fill the shoes of Duncan Robinson, at least he is one of those smaller type of chess pieces you could add to the equation in some sort of Andrew Wiggins package, or if it's a major Tyler Hero deal, while also getting $8 million off your plate. If Rozier is able to be included in some sort of deal, which is, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not entirely sure what the logistics of that would look like, you're still getting $24 million, give or take, off your plate, just getting Rozier out of there. And then whichever team decides to acquire him can then make the decision later in the or later in either the offseason or the beginning of next year, when he may or may not be eligible to play at that point. Is this a guy we would want to incorporate in our roster in the assumption that they're in desperate need of a point guard? Either way, I think it's good for Miami because you're at least getting that money off of the table. They clearly didn't want anything to do with him this summer, so it's not like I feel they're trying to make some sort of effort to see if there's a rotation where he could step in. And they're also not in desperate need of a point guard right now with Mitchell and Yakuchones, at least. Mitchell, I feel like, is a comfortable starting one right now. Yakuchones, I feel like, is still kind of getting his footing in the league a little bit. But for a team that might not necessarily have a quality starting point guard, Rozier could, ultimately change how that team looks at them in between February and the offseason. Drop in the comments what you guys think. If you guys see, these two players also being likely candidates in some sort of trade package that Miami could potentially get going in the next couple of days or so. That's going to do it for this episode of Your Heat Latest on FanArc. Don't forget to drop a like on this video, and if you haven't already, click that subscribe button. We've got great daily content you don't want to miss, all right here, Monday through Friday. Thanks again so much for joining us this Wednesday. I'm Sam Shapiro. Have a good one.